The red silk dress clung to her skin, soaked, not in champagne, not in perfume, but in something thicker. Warmer. Something that made her knees tremble. She stood barefoot in the marble foyer of her $12 million mansion, clutching a broken wine glass in one hand, the other trembling against the mahogany stair rail. Her breathing was shallow. Controlled. But her eyes? They were chaos. A man lay face down near the piano, motionless. Silence stretched through the room like a rubber band about to snap. The only sound was the slow, metronomic dripping, tick, 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 from the chandelier above. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. Instead, she stepped over him, heels clicking with the calm of a woman who'd already survived something worse. 3 hours earlier, this was supposed to be an anniversary dinner. But the woman who now stood there, Eleanor Hayes, heiress to a shipping empire and founder of one of New York's top interior design firms, wasn't just a wife anymore. She was something else now. Something dangerous. The day had begun like any other. Morning coffee. Fresh lilies in the foyer. A call from her lawyer, followed by a Pilates class and a meeting with a contractor about the lake house renovation. But by noon, the feeling had crept back in, that strange, tight sensation in her chest. The one she'd been pushing away for weeks. Months, maybe. A gut feeling. A whisper in the back of her mind. Something was off. It wasn't just that William had been coming home late. Or that he'd started sleeping with his phone under his pillow. Or that he suddenly cared a lot about going to the gym, and none about her. No, it was something deeper. Colder. As if the air had changed. And then there was the call. Around 3:30 p.m., as she sat in her office reviewing sketches for a new project in Tribeca, her assistant knocked lightly, holding out a phone. "There's, someone on the line," she said. "He says it's urgent." He wouldn't leave a name. Eleanor's brow furrowed. She almost didn't take it. Almost. "Eleanor Hayes," the man's voice crackled on the other end, low and gravelly. "You don't know me. But you should know what your husband's doing at the Carlton Hotel. Room 1904. Right now." Click. Just like that, the line went dead. She stared at the receiver for a moment, her hands suddenly cold. Room 1904. She shouldn't go. She should call someone. But she didn't. By 4:15 p.m., she was in her car, driving too fast down Madison Avenue. She told herself it was a prank. A mistake. But deep down, she already knew. The doorman at the Carlton recognized her immediately, offered a polite nod as he opened the door, unaware that he was letting her into a different life entirely. The elevator ride to the 19th floor felt endless. Her heart pounded in her ears. Room 1904 was at the far end of the hall. She knocked once. No answer. She knocked again. Still nothing. But then, laughter. A woman's voice. Light. Playful. And William's, unmistakably deep, responding. She didn't knock a third time. She turned the handle. Unlocked. And stepped inside. The room smelled like wine and perfume. The curtains were half drawn, and sunlight spilled across a messy bed. Red lingerie was tossed carelessly over the arm of a velvet chair. William's shirt was on the floor. He didn't hear her enter at first, too caught up in whatever whispered moment he was sharing with the woman in the bathroom. "Do you like the necklace?" the woman asked. "It must have cost a fortune." "It's yours now," William said. Eleanor didn't feel her body move. She didn't feel her fingers curl into fists. She only felt cold. Icy, arctic cold in her veins. The bathroom door swung open, and that's when he saw her. William froze. The woman screamed. Eleanor didn't. She just smiled. I always knew you were cheap, she said softly. But motel jewelry? Really? What happened next, she couldn't fully remember. Words were thrown. Insults hurled like grenades. The mistress fled barefoot, wrapped in a towel, weeping into her phone. Eleanor didn't chase her. She stared at William, his face pale, mouth open like a fish, and something inside her snapped. Or maybe it finally healed. She walked out. She didn't cry. Not yet. Back at the house, she prepared dinner. Yes, dinner. Salmon, roasted asparagus, a chilled bottle of Chardonnay. She set the table with their wedding china. Lit candles. Even put on the red dress he once said he loved. It wasn't for him. It was for closure. William came home around 7:50 p.m., his face stiff with panic. He called her name twice before finding her in the dining room. "You cooked?" he said, like it was a trap. "I thought we could talk," she said. He sat. They ate in near silence. The ticking clock, the clinking of silverware, and the crackling fire behind her were the only sounds. "Halfway through dinner," he said, "I didn't mean for you to find out like that." She took a sip of wine. "I'm not stupid, William." "You think I didn't know?" His jaw tensed. It wasn't serious. No. It never is, until it is. He opened his mouth to speak again, but froze. Because Eleanor had stood up. And she was holding a file. Documents. Photos. Bank transfers. Receipts. Every lie, every secret, every stolen dollar from their joint account laid bare. She tossed it onto his lap. "I know about the offshore accounts," she said. "The penthouse in her name. The yacht. My family's money, every cent you laundered through your startup scam. All of it." He stood now, angry. "You were spying on me?" "No," she said. "I was protecting myself." And then, the sound. Glass shattering. The wine glass in his hand hit the floor. His face contorted. What did you do?" he gasped, clutching his throat. Eleanor tilted her head. "Nothing you didn't deserve." He stumbled back, reaching for the table. But he never made it. He crashed onto the polished floor with a dull thud, right in front of the Steinway grand piano. But here's the twist. She hadn't poisoned him. She hadn't touched his food. Hadn't slipped anything into his drink. He'd done that to himself. Panic. Guilt. Or karma, who's to say? She checked his pulse. Alive. Barely. She called 911. Calm. Precise. "Hello, yes. My husband collapsed. It looks like a seizure. Please hurry." And then, as she waited for the sirens to arrive, she did something unexpected. She smiled. Not because he was dying. But because she had just begun to live. And as the paramedics wheeled him out, unconscious but breathing, Eleanor stood on the steps of her mansion, the red dress fluttering in the wind like a war flag. This wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. Because while William clung to life, Eleanor was about to uncover a truth even darker than betrayal. A mystery buried in her own home. One that would change everything. Forever. Eleanor stood in the center of the foyer, staring at the blood-red dress she had worn hours earlier. The silk was now neatly folded on the velvet armchair where she'd left it. The evening had unraveled in ways she hadn't predicted, but a strange calmness had settled over her. It was as if a heavy weight had been lifted, but she was still walking on a fine line, one that could snap at any moment. Her hands trembled as she poured herself another glass of wine, the amber liquid shimmering under the soft glow of the chandelier above. The glass was half full, but the unease inside her had become a steady rhythm, like the ticking of an unseen clock. Her husband, William, was in a hospital bed now. The paramedics had managed to stabilize him, though he was still unconscious. His doctors had said it was a seizure, or maybe it was just the shock of what he had done to himself. Whatever the cause, Eleanor wasn't concerned about that. She wasn't worried about him. Not anymore. No, her mind was focused on the mess she had inherited. His betrayal, his lies, the mess he had made of their lives. All of it was just the beginning. As the evening crept on, the house grew eerily silent. She glanced at the clock, 1:17 a.m. The soft clinking of her wine glass as she set it down was the loudest sound in the house. Then the doorbell rang. Her heart skipped a beat. She wasn't expecting anyone, not at this hour. She stood motionless for a moment, eyes darting to the front door, trying to think. The sound of the bell echoed through the mansion, cutting through the silence like a knife. The butler was on leave for the week, and there was no one else to answer it. Eleanor slowly rose from her chair, the soft swish of her gown brushing against the floor as she approached the door. She reached for the handle, taking a steadying breath before pulling it open. There, standing under the porch light, was a man she hadn't seen in years, a face she recognized instantly. Liam Cross. Her former colleague, and the one person who had always been a mystery to her. His eyes, a sharp blue, now locked with hers in a knowing gaze. "What the hell are you doing here?" Eleanor asked, her voice suddenly sharp. "I think we need to talk," Liam said, his voice low but steady. Eleanor stepped back, allowing him to enter, but her mind was racing. Why was Liam here? What did he know? And why now? They moved into the living room, the air thick with tension. Eleanor sat on one of the plush chairs, her eyes never leaving Liam as he sat across from her, his posture relaxed but his gaze intense. "You're wondering why I'm here," Liam said, breaking the silence. "I'll get straight to the point. I know what your husband has been hiding. And I think you need to know everything." Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes narrowed, her lips pressed into a tight line. "What are you talking about? You didn't think his little affair was the only thing he was hiding from you, did you?" Liam's voice was low but heavy with meaning. "There's more, Eleanor. Much more." Her heart raced as the words sank in. She couldn't believe it. She had already uncovered so much about William's lies, but there was more? How deep did this go? "Tell me everything," Eleanor demanded, her voice hard. Liam leaned back, his eyes never leaving hers. "There's a file. One that William kept hidden, even from his most trusted associates. It's full of information that could ruin him, but also, ruin you. You've always been the perfect wife, haven't you? The perfect public image. But that's not all there is to it, Eleanor. There's something bigger here." Eleanor's chest tightened. "What are you trying to say?" "I'm saying that your husband's business dealings weren't just about money. He was laundering it for someone, for something much darker. And you were part of it all along. Whether you knew it or not, Eleanor, you've been complicit." The words hit like a freight train. Eleanor's mind raced as the pieces began to fall into place, but the full picture was still too blurry. "No. That's impossible." "I don't." "I know it's hard to believe," Liam interrupted, his gaze intense, "but this goes far beyond what you think. It's not just about the money. It's about who he's been working with. The people who have been pulling his strings for years. And now they're going to come for you, too." Eleanor's thoughts whirled. Her life had always been meticulously curated, carefully crafted. She had built her empire, her reputation, her marriage, and all of it was being unraveled in front of her eyes. "Who is it, Liam? Who's behind all of this?" she asked, her voice a whisper. He hesitated for a moment, then said, "I don't have all the answers yet. But I do know this, it's bigger than William. Much bigger. Eleanor stood up, her legs shaking slightly beneath her as she paced the room. What do I do now? You need to find that file. You need to go through everything your husband has been hiding. And then, you need to get ahead of this. Because if you don't, Eleanor, it's going to swallow you whole. She could feel the weight of his words pressing down on her. She had always prided herself on being in control, but now, for the first time in her life, she was not just at the mercy of her husband's actions, she was in the middle of something much more dangerous, something far beyond her comprehension. Where is it? Eleanor asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Liam didn't answer immediately. He looked around the room, as if searching for the right words. It's hidden in plain sight. You won't find it unless you're looking for it. Eleanor's pulse quickened. She had no time to waste. She needed to get to the bottom of this, not just for her own sake, but for everything she had worked for. Thank you, she said, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. Liam didn't respond. Instead, he gave her a final, lingering look before turning to leave. I'm not the enemy here, Eleanor. But you need to be careful. They'll come for you if you're not. The door closed behind him with a soft thud, leaving Eleanor standing in the middle of the room, her thoughts swirling. She didn't know who to trust anymore. The only thing she knew for certain was that her world had just shifted on its axis. The stakes had been raised. The game had changed. As she moved toward her study, her mind raced. What was this file? What did it contain? And who were the people behind it all? The answers weren't clear, but one thing was. She wasn't going to sit idly by and let her life be destroyed. Eleanor began to dig. She pored over the paperwork William had left behind, accounts, investments, travel records. But nothing made sense. Everything was scattered, incomplete, fragmented. She stood up in frustration and walked to the back of her study, her gaze falling on the large bookshelf that lined the wall. She had passed this shelf 1,000 times before, but tonight, something felt different. She ran her fingers across the spines of the books, searching for something, anything that would give her a clue. And then she found it. A book she hadn't seen before, a thick, leather-bound journal hidden behind a row of well-loved classics. Her breath caught in her throat. This was it. This was the file. But as she opened the journal, she knew that what she would discover inside would change everything. Eleanor sat at her desk, the journal heavy in her hands. The leather was worn, and the faint smell of old paper mixed with the dust in the air. Her fingers hovered over the pages, the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. She had found it. After hours of searching through William's files, after listening to Liam's warnings, this journal was the one piece of the puzzle she had been missing. But as she opened it, a strange, gnawing feeling took hold of her gut. She had expected to find more of the same, receipts, transactions, business lingo. But what lay before her was far more personal. The first page was filled with hurried, scrawled handwriting. The words were jagged, as if they had been written in haste, but they were legible. They don't know. They have no idea. I can keep this hidden forever if I'm careful. The only thing that matters now is keeping her in the dark. As long as she doesn't know, we're safe. We can't risk her finding out what I've done. But the money's flowing, and the connections are stronger than ever. I'll take her with me when the time is right. And then, everything will fall into place. Eleanor's breath hitched. Her mind raced. She recognized the handwriting, but the words were foreign. This wasn't just business, this was something personal. She turned the page, her fingers trembling slightly as she moved forward. Each entry grew darker, more cryptic. The entries were filled with names she didn't recognize, dates that didn't make sense, and phrases that sent shivers down her spine. But it was the last entry that made her blood run cold. I've secured the final piece. The plan is in motion. She'll never see it coming. And when it's all over, no one will question it. No one will know how it happened. This will be the end. Eleanor's mind spun. Who was he talking about? The final piece? And what plan was he referring to? This was no longer just about her husband's affair. This was about something far more sinister, something that had been in the works for years. The room around her seemed to close in, the walls pressing in as the weight of what she had discovered began to settle. She couldn't breathe. She had to keep reading. As she turned another page, a small, folded piece of paper slipped out from between the pages. Eleanor unfolded it carefully, her eyes scanning the handwritten note. The meeting is set for next week. Everything is on track. We will finalize everything in Paris. Do not worry. The plan will succeed. Once it's done, there will be no going back. Paris. Her heart skipped a beat. William had been to Paris only a month ago. But he had told her it was a business trip, that it was all about negotiations for his startup. Now, she wasn't so sure. That the meeting, he had mentioned, could be linked to something much darker. And the mention of Paris only heightened her suspicions. She had to get answers. The following morning, Eleanor woke early, the weight of the journal still fresh in her mind. The sun had barely risen, casting long shadows across the living room. The house felt colder than usual, as if the very walls were aware of the darkness she had uncovered. Her phone buzzed on the table, and she picked it up with a start. It was a text message from Liam. I hope you've had time to go through the journal. You're going to need more than that to figure this out. But be careful. They're watching. You don't know who's involved, but it's bigger than just William. The message sent a chill down her spine. Bigger than William. That was the last thing she needed to hear. She had already known that this was spiraling out of control, but now, it felt like a warning, a reminder that the darkness she had uncovered was only the surface. Eleanor stood up from the table, her hands gripping the journal tightly. She had to know more. She needed to understand everything that had been hidden from her for so long. And there was only one place where she could start. By noon, Eleanor was at the office. She had called in a private investigator, someone she had worked with in the past, but someone who could be trusted. His name was Marcus, and he was as sharp as they came. If anyone could help her untangle the mess that was William's life, it was Marcus. She found him sitting at the conference table, his dark eyes scanning over a set of files. His expression was stoic, as always, but Eleanor could sense the tension in the room. This wasn't just about finding the truth. This was about survival. Marcus, she said, sitting down across from him. I need your help. I have something for you to look at. She handed him the journal. He didn't ask questions. Instead, he took it, opened the first page, and began to read. The minutes ticked by in silence. Eleanor watched him closely, her fingers tapping on the edge of the table. She had no idea what he would find, but the way he flipped through the pages without saying a word made her nervous. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Marcus looked up from the journal. This is troubling. What do you mean? Eleanor asked, leaning forward. The entries are consistent with someone who's been planning something for a long time, Marcus said. And the fact that William was involved in something like this, it's not good. This doesn't just affect him. This could bring down everyone around him. Eleanor's stomach dropped. What do you mean by, bring down everyone? Marcus closed the journal and placed it on the table in front of her. This isn't just about money, Eleanor. Whoever William was dealing with is part of a much larger network. This meeting in Paris? That's not just a business deal. That's part of something deeper. And if we don't find out who he was really working with, this could end with more than just your marriage falling apart. Eleanor's mind raced. She had to know more. She had to find the people behind all of this. But where could she even start? We need to get to Paris, Marcus continued. There's a chance that the records from William's trip, his itinerary, hotel details, and any meetings he had, could give us the answers we need. We'll follow the trail there. Eleanor nodded, feeling the weight of the decision settle in. She didn't know what she was about to uncover, but she had no choice. She couldn't stop now. 2 days later, Eleanor found herself on a private jet, heading toward Paris. She sat in the plush seat, staring out the window at the clouds below. Her mind was filled with thoughts of what she was about to face. She had no idea who she could trust anymore. Liam? Marcus? Or was she truly alone in this? As the plane descended toward Charles de Gaulle Airport, Eleanor's heart raced. Paris. A city of lights, a city of romance, but now, for her, a city of lies. She had no idea what she would find, but she was ready to uncover the truth, no matter what it took. The airport was bustling with activity as Eleanor and Marcus made their way through the crowd. They moved quickly, blending in with the sea of people, but Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. They took a taxi to the hotel where William had stayed during his trip. The hotel was luxurious, tucked away in the heart of the city's most exclusive district. But even the grandiose surroundings couldn't mask the unease that gnawed at Eleanor. Inside, the lobby was pristine, the marble floors gleaming beneath her feet. The receptionist greeted them with a polite smile, but Eleanor could tell she wasn't the only one who noticed the cold tension in the air. Marcus wasted no time. He slipped the receptionist a few €100 and was able to get access to William's booking records, a move that surprised Eleanor, considering how discreet he had been about it. Room 402, Marcus said, handing her the keycard. We'll start there. As they rode the elevator to the 4th floor, Eleanor couldn't help but wonder what they would find. The truth was getting closer, and with every step, she felt herself sinking deeper into a world of secrets and shadows. The elevator door opened with a soft chime, and Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. Room 402. She glanced at Marcus, whose face was unreadable, his gaze sharp and focused. He led the way down the plush carpeted hallway of the upscale Parisian hotel, each footstep echoing in the silent corridor. Eleanor felt a growing sense of foreboding, the weight of the moment pressing on her chest. The door to room 402 was at the end of the hall, its brass plaque gleaming in the dim light. The air around her felt thick with tension, like something was waiting to happen, something that would change everything. Marcus reached for the door handle, his movements smooth and efficient. He gave Eleanor a quick glance, his eyes dark with unspoken words. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, his voice low. Eleanor nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure she was. She had come this far, but the deeper she dug, the more her world seemed to shatter. She had been married to William for 10 years, and yet now, with each revelation, it felt as though she never really knew him at all. Marcus turned the handle and pushed the door open, the faint creak of the hinges making her flinch. The room inside was exactly as she had imagined. Elegant, with polished furniture, a king-sized bed, and the unmistakable scent of expensive cologne still lingering in the air. But it was the details that caught her attention. On the coffee table sat a half-empty glass of wine, the red liquid dark against the crystal. A laptop lay open on the desk, the screen blank, but its presence was telling. It was clear that William had spent a considerable amount of time in this room, and the idea that this was just a business trip now felt like a lie. Eleanor stepped forward, her eyes scanning the room. Her fingers brushed the edge of the wine glass as she moved past it, heading straight for the desk. The laptop seemed out of place, almost like an afterthought, yet, it was exactly what she needed. The key to understanding what had really happened in Paris. "Marcus, check the drawers," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions churning inside her. Marcus didn't hesitate. He moved swiftly, opening the first drawer of the desk and then the second. Papers, travel receipts, and documents that seemed unimportant were scattered around, but nothing that gave away the secrets she sought. Eleanor sat down in the chair in front of the desk, her fingers moving quickly to open the laptop. She didn't have much time. If there was something here, it had to be now. The laptop was password protected, of course, but she had been married to William long enough to know his habits. She began typing the usual combinations: their anniversary, their wedding date, the names of places they'd visited together. It was the fourth try when the screen flickered to life. Yes, Eleanor whispered under her breath. The laptop opened to a file folder, and inside were several documents, each titled with dates and numbers that didn't mean much at first glance. But one stood out, a file labeled Final Transaction. Eleanor's pulse quickened. She clicked it open without hesitation. The document inside was a detailed account of large sums of money, millions of dollars, all flowing in and out of various shell companies. Names that meant nothing to her at first glance were scattered throughout. But as Eleanor read further, the pattern became clear. This wasn't just about money laundering, this was a well-coordinated operation involving multiple entities across Europe, and William had been right at the center of it. Her mind raced as she absorbed the details. The transaction flow was intricate, designed to cover up illegal dealings under the guise of legitimate business investments. But there was one thing that stood out: the name Hale Group International. It was a company she had never heard of before, and yet it appeared in almost every major transaction. The name seemed to be the keystone of everything William had been involved in. "Marcus, look at this," Eleanor said, her voice tense. She handed him the laptop, pointing at the screen. Marcus leaned over her shoulder, his brow furrowing as he scanned the document. Hale Group. That's not just a company. That's a front. I've heard whispers about them. They're rumored to be tied to some very dangerous people. People who can make anyone disappear if they want to. Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. Disappear? Exactly. Hale Group operates in the shadows. They've been linked to organized crime, weapons smuggling, and even human trafficking. If William was involved with them, well, he wasn't just playing with fire. He was diving headfirst into an inferno. Eleanor's hand tightened around the laptop, her knuckles going white. She needed more answers. She needed to know how deep William's involvement went. But there was still so much she didn't understand. Why was he involved with them? And what did it have to do with her? The file had one final entry, dated just 2 days before William's trip to Paris. It was a short sentence, written in a way that suggested urgency. Meet with Hale's representative. Finalize the deal. No turning back. Eleanor felt a sharp pang in her chest. She couldn't let it end like this. She couldn't let her husband's secrets swallow her whole. Marcus, we need to find out where Hale Group operates. We need to go to them. Eleanor stood up, her decision clear. Marcus hesitated. Are you sure? We're already in over our heads. These people don't just play around. They'll do anything to protect their operation. I don't care, Eleanor said, her voice cold. I have to know everything. I have to stop whatever it is that William got himself into. This isn't just about him anymore. Marcus gave her a long look, then nodded slowly. All right. But we do this carefully. We can't afford to make any mistakes. The next morning, Eleanor and Marcus boarded another flight, this time to Zurich. From there, they would travel to a remote location where they believed Hale Group operated. It wasn't just a city, but a hidden network, a ghost operation that no one had been able to infiltrate. The more they uncovered, the more dangerous it became. As the plane descended into Zurich, Eleanor's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. What if they were too late? What if the people behind Hale Group had already taken action? By the time they arrived at their destination, the sun was setting, casting long shadows over the Swiss landscape. They had arranged a meeting with an old contact of Marcus's, someone who could provide more intel on Hale Group's operations. The meeting spot was a small cafe tucked away in the corner of the city's busy center. It was a place of shadows and whispers, frequented by those who preferred to remain unseen. Eleanor and Marcus sat down at a secluded table near the back, their eyes scanning the room for any signs of danger. A man approached them, dressed in dark clothing, his face partially obscured by a hood. He sat down without a word, his presence heavy with silent knowledge. This was it. The man who could potentially provide them with answers. "You have the information I asked for?" Marcus's voice was calm, but Eleanor could hear the edge beneath it. The man nodded, sliding a manila envelope across the table. "This is everything I've been able to gather. It's not much, but it's enough to start." Eleanor's breath caught as she opened the envelope. Inside were several photographs, grainy, but unmistakable. William was in each one, standing next to various men whose faces were unfamiliar but whose presence radiated power. The last photo was the most chilling, William shaking hands with a man whose face was barely visible, but whose demeanor radiated menace. "This is Hale," Marcus said quietly, his eyes narrowing as he studied the photo. "This is the man pulling the strings." Eleanor's heart dropped. She had come so far, but the questions were only multiplying. What had William gotten involved in? Who was Hale? And more importantly, how was she going to stop this before it consumed her, too? Eleanor sat in the back of the blacked-out car as it sped through the narrow streets of Zurich. The city lights blurred into a dull shimmer outside the window, reflecting her fractured state of mind. Her hands were clenched tight in her lap, the knuckles white with the tension that had become her constant companion. Her world had already spiraled out of control. William's betrayal, his ties to Hale Group, the mysterious dealings, each discovery felt like a nail being driven deeper into her heart. But now, the weight of what was to come pressed down harder than ever. The manila envelope, still clutched in her hand, held the answers she sought. But it also held more than she could comprehend. Her heart raced as she thought about the photograph of William shaking hands with Hale's representative. The face in the image was blurry, but the message was clear: William had been working with a criminal network far bigger than she had ever imagined. And it wasn't just a financial affair. The implications were far darker, more twisted. Hale wasn't just a business partner, he was the shadow that loomed over everything. Her thoughts were interrupted when the car made a sharp turn, slowing as it approached a secluded building on the outskirts of Zurich. Marcus, who had been silent beside her, finally spoke. "This is it. We're close. Our contact said Hale's people will be here." Eleanor nodded, feeling a cold lump form in her throat. Hale's people. The very word seemed to carry the weight of 100 fears. They had come this far, and now, it was too late to turn back. She could only pray that whatever lay ahead would bring her the truth, and maybe, just maybe, the chance to stop the madness before it consumed her entirely. The car stopped in front of a nondescript warehouse. It was a far cry from the luxurious hotels and business meetings she had come to associate with her husband. This was no place for high-profile business deals. This was the underbelly of the operation, where the darkness thrived. The only thing that stood out was the silence, thick, oppressive, and palpable. Marcus opened the door and stepped out, followed closely by Eleanor. She swallowed hard, her breath catching in her throat as they walked toward the entrance of the warehouse. She felt exposed, vulnerable. She had no idea who these people were, what they were capable of, or what they wanted from her. All she knew was that she couldn't back down now. She had to see this through, for her own peace of mind, and for the sake of whatever was left of her shattered world. The door creaked open, and they stepped into the dimly lit interior of the warehouse. The air was stale, thick with the smell of old wood and metal. At first, there was nothing but the distant hum of machinery. But then, a figure emerged from the shadows. A man, tall and imposing, stepped forward. His face was partially obscured by a dark cap, and his sharp eyes flicked over them both, sizing them up in an instant. He didn't speak, just motioned for them to follow. Eleanor exchanged a quick glance with Marcus before nodding. This was the moment of truth. She had to trust that Marcus knew what he was doing. She had no choice but to follow. They walked deeper into the warehouse, the footsteps echoing in the vast space. The further they went, the more oppressive the silence became. The air seemed to grow heavier with every step, as though the very walls were closing in around them. Finally, they reached a small office at the far end of the building. The door swung open with a low squeak, and the figure stepped aside to let them enter. Eleanor's eyes scanned the room quickly, a bare desk, a few chairs, and the faint glow of a single desk lamp. And sitting behind the desk, as if waiting for them, was the man from the photograph, the one shaking hands with William. He wasn't as blurry in person. Hale was a tall man, well-groomed, with dark, calculating eyes. His appearance was polished, but there was an undeniable aura of menace that clung to him, like a shadow that would never leave. Eleanor's heart pounded as he looked at them with an unsettling calm. "So, you've come to see the truth," Hale said, his voice smooth, almost soothing. It was a voice that suggested control, dominance. He didn't seem surprised to see them, as though he had been expecting them all along. Marcus didn't flinch. He stood tall, his arms crossed. "We've been following the money. We know about Hale Group, and we know about your dealings with my client's husband. We want answers." Hale leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. "Answers? I'm afraid you won't get them the way you think you will. You see, the truth is a slippery thing. It's not always what you expect." Eleanor could feel her pulse quicken, but she held her ground. She had no choice. She couldn't let fear dictate her actions now. "What is it you've done with William?" Eleanor demanded, her voice betraying a mixture of anger and fear. "Why did he get involved with you? What does this all mean?" Hale smiled, though the expression didn't reach his eyes. William was a very ambitious man. And ambition, as you might know, comes with a price. His eyes flicked to Marcus, then back to Eleanor. "But what does it mean for you? You're asking the wrong question. The real question is, what will you do about it?" Eleanor's throat tightened. She had no idea how to respond. What could she do about it? It felt like she was standing at the edge of an abyss, staring into the unknown, with no idea how deep the fall would be. Hale stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "You came here for answers. But I'm afraid the answers you seek won't be so easily handed to you." He moved to a cabinet on the far side of the room and opened it, pulling out a manila folder. He tossed it onto the desk in front of Eleanor, the contents spilling out. It was a series of photographs. The first image made her blood run cold, William, standing in a dark room, shaking hands with a man who looked familiar. It was the same person from the previous photograph, but this time the identity was clearer. "Who is this?" Eleanor asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts. "That," Hale said, his tone now edged with something colder, more dangerous, "is someone you don't want to know. Someone your husband should never have gotten involved with." Eleanor's eyes flicked over the rest of the photos. Each one was more damning than the last. They showed William in various locations, meeting with different men, exchanging briefcases, shaking hands, discussing plans. The pictures were a record of his involvement with Hale Group. And they painted a picture of a man far removed from the husband she had known. "Why?" Eleanor whispered. "Why would he do this?" Hale's smile faded, and for the first time, Eleanor saw a flicker of something like contempt in his eyes. "Because greed is a powerful motivator." "And your husband?" "He had the perfect opportunity to secure his future. He wanted something more than just a family and a comfortable life. And when I offered him that, he didn't hesitate. The room seemed to close in around Eleanor. She couldn't breathe. William, her William, had traded everything, their family, their life together, for money and power. He had sold his soul. And now, she was standing in the middle of it all, trying to make sense of a reality that had been hidden from her for so long. Hale stepped forward, his voice low and chilling. "But you're too late. You're already in over your head. William made his choices. Now, it's time for you to make yours." Eleanor's hands shook as she reached for the photos, her mind racing. She had to get out of here. She had to stop this madness before it was too late. But the walls were closing in. "Your husband isn't the only one who made a deal," Hale continued, his tone dripping with venom. "And soon, you'll understand what happens when you cross us." Eleanor's blood ran cold. It wasn't just about William anymore. It was about her. She was a part of this, whether she wanted to be or not. The silence in the room was suffocating. The truth had been laid bare, and now, Eleanor had to decide, would she fight back, or would she be consumed by the darkness? The cold, concrete walls of the warehouse seemed to close in on Eleanor as Hale's chilling words echoed in her ears. She could hear the faint hum of machinery in the background, but everything felt distant. The weight of the moment, the betrayal, the lies, the danger that surrounded her, pressed down on her chest, suffocating her. Hale's face, still composed, seemed to mock her, as if he knew exactly how she would react. Eleanor's hands were trembling, but she clenched them into fists, willing herself to remain calm. She couldn't let fear control her. "Not now. You have no idea what you're up against, Eleanor," Hale continued, his voice smooth, almost patronizing. "Your husband made his choices, but you? You can still walk away. This doesn't have to be your fight." Eleanor's mind raced. Walk away? Was that even an option? William had been lost to this world of corruption, but she had never been part of it. Or had she? The deeper she dug, the more it became clear that she, too, was caught in a web of deception, her entire life a carefully constructed lie. Her heart pounded as she glanced at Marcus, who stood beside her, his jaw set in a determined line. He was the one person she could trust in this madness. Together, they had uncovered the truth about Hale Group, about William's dark dealings, but now they had to face the consequences. They had come so far, but could they stop it? Was it even possible to undo the damage William had done? "We're not walking away," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside her. "You've taken everything from me. My husband, my family, my peace of mind. I'm not leaving without answers, and justice." Hale's lips curled into a thin smile. "Justice? For who, exactly? Your husband? The man who betrayed you and sold his soul for money? Or perhaps for yourself? You don't understand, Eleanor. You never did." A cold chill ran down her spine. He's right. She had never truly understood. The man she had loved, the one who had promised her a life of happiness and stability, was nothing more than a shadow, a facade hiding his true nature. William's betrayal ran deeper than she could have imagined, and the consequences of his actions had infected everything, even her. Eleanor's mind flashed to their life together, the love they had shared, the moments they had built, now tainted by lies and deceit. She could almost hear William's voice in her head, his words about his ambitions, his need for more. She had believed in him, trusted him. But now, those memories felt hollow. "I'm not asking for your permission," Eleanor said, taking a step forward. "I want the truth. I want to know why you're doing this. Why you've dragged my family into this mess. Why did William get involved in Hale Group in the first place?" Hale's smile faltered for a brief moment, and that gave Eleanor a sense of power she hadn't felt in days. She wasn't going to let this man intimidate her any longer. Not after everything she had learned. William wasn't just seeking power, Hale said, his voice soft, almost like a teacher explaining something to a child. He was seeking immortality. This organization, it's bigger than just money. We offer something no one else can. We offer eternity. And William, like so many before him, was willing to pay whatever price was necessary. Eleanor's stomach churned. Eternity? The word hung in the air, cold and unnatural. What could Hale possibly mean by that? Eternity? Marcus's voice cut through the thick tension in the room, his tone laced with disbelief. Are you saying your organization has some sort of immortality technology? Are you trying to tell us that's what William was after? Hale's eyes glinted with something darker, something more sinister. Not immortality in the sense you understand it. But yes, we offer something akin to it. Power that lasts beyond a single lifetime. Influence that transcends death. For the right price. Eleanor felt her knees weaken as the implications of his words settled over her. This was madness. They were talking about something far beyond simple greed or power. Hale Group wasn't just involved in criminal activity, it was something else entirely. Your husband knew what he was getting into, Hale continued. He knew what he had to do to secure his place in this new world. And he was willing to make any sacrifice to get there. But not my family. Eleanor snapped, her voice breaking through the haze of disbelief. Not me. You can't just tear everything apart for your own gain. What kind of person does that? Hale's expression hardened, his eyes narrowing as he stepped closer to her. The kind of person who understands what the world really is. The kind of person who sees beyond the lies, beyond the illusion of normalcy. William wasn't weak like the others. He was strong enough to make the decision you couldn't. He chose greatness. Eleanor's breath hitched as the final realization hit her like a punch to the gut. William had been seeking power, a power that transcended everything she had known. And in his pursuit of it, he had made a deal with monsters. He had sold her, their family, their future, everything, for a chance at eternal influence. Where is he? Eleanor demanded, her voice desperate. Where is my husband? Hale's face remained cold. He's already gone, Eleanor. The man you knew, he's not coming back. The words hung in the air, a final death sentence to everything Eleanor had hoped for. Her marriage, her life, all of it had been a lie. William had chosen this path long before she knew it. She had been nothing more than collateral damage in his quest for something beyond this world. Her vision blurred with tears, but she blinked them away. She couldn't afford to break down now. Not when there was still hope. You may have taken him from me, Hale, she said, her voice trembling with emotion, but you won't take me. I'll expose you. I'll make sure the world knows what Hale Group really is. Hale's lips curled into a smile again, but it was different this time. It wasn't a smile of mockery or amusement. It was cold, calculating. You think you can stop us? You think you can take down what we've built? You've already lost, Eleanor. The game is over. Marcus's hand shot out, grabbing Eleanor's arm. We need to go, Eleanor. Now. Before she could respond, the warehouse doors burst open. Several armed men flooded the room, their faces hidden behind masks. Eleanor's heart raced, and she instinctively stepped back, knowing the situation had escalated beyond anything she could have prepared for. Hale looked at her one last time, his eyes cold and empty. You'll regret this, Eleanor. It's already too late. But Eleanor didn't feel fear. Not anymore. She felt something else, something more powerful. You're wrong, she said, her voice firm. It's never too late. Not for me. With one last defiant look, Eleanor turned and bolted from the room, Marcus close behind her. They ran through the dark corridors of the warehouse, the sound of footsteps echoing around them. They had to get out, and fast. The final showdown wasn't about who could survive. It was about making a choice to reclaim everything that had been stolen. Eleanor wasn't going to let Hale Group win. She wasn't going to let William's betrayal define her future.